with the incoming gust of cold air and snow. The holiday season was approaching. The Christmas lights and the smell of the glühwein in the air reminded that it is time for another trip, another journey to experience Europe. During the week of Christmas, it is officially the holiday season and the campus becomes a very lonely place. So that is the perfect time for a trip. And plan was hatched for a week-long trip across 4 countries. We will start in Munich, travel to Vienna, then to Prague, Cologne and Amsterdam. I am traveling with Somnath for this trip. He will join me from Vienna. In this one short week, we will briefly visit the palaces of the Habsburgs in Vienna, walk across the Charles Bridge in Prague, marvel at the Cologne Cathedral, visit some of the many famous museums in Amsterdam, and even visit the Dutch countryside. Alright, enough allures. Let's go. It goes without saying that such a trip requires careful and meticulous planning beforehand. In this case, I used Travify.com to lay out our initial itinerary, which I modified and changed as the planning proceeded. I found it quite handy and useful. Once that was done, we sat together one day over the internet and for 8 straight hours booked all train and flight tickets as well as all hotels for all our stays. Along the way, we discussed and fixed a few problems that was there in the initial plan. With that, our plan was official and ready and it was time to get set up. Packing for this trip was complicated for me because I had to shift my house, visit Sweden and pack for the trip all at the same time. Due to this, I took a very methodical approach with checklists for every item that I need to take. My Laue Pro backpack, which I use for my photography, has my camera equipment and everything else goes in a small trolley. The checklist keeps track of what I am taking and this way I don't miss anything. This methodical approach ensures a trouble-free time ahead, and with that I am soon ready to head out. From Munich, Vienna is just 4 hours by train. I started from the Munich Central Station, called as Hauptbahnhof, at about 6 p.m. and after a quick change at Salzburg Station, I arrived at the Wien-Mail Station at about 10 p.m. From there, I took the underground, which is known as the U-Bahn, to get to Meilinghaufstrasse, where Somnath lives. Now with that, my day is done and after some pasta together at dinner, it's time to go to bed. Vienna, or Wien as it's known in German, is a very old city. For about 400 years, it was the capital for one of the most influential and outstanding royal houses of Europe, the House of Habsburg. Walking around in Vienna, you can still feel the royal vibe in the air today. From our residence, the Schönbrunn Palace is at a walking distance. This place was the summer resort for the Habsburgs. Located outside the main city boundaries with plenty of land, we could immediately feel the colder temperature and the air flowing. That is why the kings used to come here in the summer. Inside the palace, there is a beautiful museum dedicated to the Empress Sisi, but for today, we will explore the outside. On the back side of the castle, there is a beautiful garden, and the garden axis points to a hill on top of which there is a gloriette. Built in 1775, the building was to serve both as a focal and a lookout point. The gloriette is dedicated as a monument to the just war, and the inscription reads, erected under the reign of Emperor Joseph II and Empress Maria Theresa, 1775. Once used for royal diners and festivities, today the Gloriette has a cafe inside and an observation deck with panoramic views of the city. After enjoying the scene for a while, we came back to the front of the castle grounds where there is a Christmas market at this time of the year. Some glühwein to whisk the cold away, and we were off to the city center. We arrived at Karlsplatz by metro and started walking to the Karl's church. This church with an exquisite dome is one of the best in Vienna and is dedicated to Charles Borromeo and built in the early 1700s. In front of the church, we saw something quite funny.
কি হচ্ছে এটা? এটা আবার এটা কি ধরনের জিনিস? আরে তুই গল্পটা তো পড়তে হবে।
To me, it was quite funny, but let's move on. We did not go inside the church, but rather kept walking towards the Hofburg Palace. This is the central part of Vienna, or District 1 as it is known. In every direction, there is a royal vibe. The buildings display ornate facades and are clearly from the ancient times. There are horse carriages passing through, and the old feelings really reign supreme here. Here, on the way to the Hofburg Palace, we caught a peek at the famous opera house in Vienna across the street. During Christmas time, the streets of Vienna are beautifully decorated. We are now at Philharmonikerstraße, and the State Opera House of Vienna can be seen here. The State Opera in Vienna is very famous and is more than 100 years old. From full-on guided tours to inexpensive standing tickets, everything is available here. This is one of the prime destinations for music lovers in Vienna. Here, we are passing through one of the shopping streets in Vienna. Notice there are no cars here. This is a pedestrian only zone. Here, Somnath wanted to go to a shop to buy some fountain pens. We reached the Hofburg Palace at about 1 p.m. We entered from the back side due to our approach and tried some portraits there because there are not many tourists in this part of the castle. Then we arrived at the main square, which is known as Heldenplatz, through the building. Hofburg Palace was the main palace for the Habsburgs. This mighty palace shows the extent of wealth and power the kings had at their peak. The palace serves today as the official residence and workplace of the President of Austria. During night also, the palace looks amazing. In front of the palace is the statue of Franz Joseph II on a horse, and on the other side of Heldenplatz is the statue of Archduke Charles. The town hall or Rathaus of Vienna can be seen behind the statue in this picture. All this walking around made us hungry, so we went to an Italian restaurant to refuel. Then it was time to see one of the most iconic locations of Vienna, the St. Stephen's Cathedral. The St. Stephen's Cathedral is located in Stephansplatz, one of the most iconic and oldest square in Vienna. With horse-drawn carriages and the iconic Gothic church, a medieval time soon comes to mind. The St. Stephen's Cathedral is more than 500 years old. Duke Rudolf IV commissioned the church in 1340. The southern spire is 450 feet tall with a golden orb and cross. The colorful roof is 200 feet tall and is covered in 230,000 ceramic tiles. The north tower is just half as tall, and that is due to Ottoman invasion in 1511, which led to the construction of the tower to stop and was never finished thereafter. This church has seen many wars and survived to tell about it. If you look carefully, somewhere in the church walls, a cannonball can be seen lodged, though I was not able to spot it. During the Second World War, in 1945, the wooden roof caught fire and was completely burned. The stone pillar survived, and after the war, those who donated for the reconstruction of the church got to own a tile, and the new roof was completed in 1952 in the old style. This church has much more to it, but that is for another time. For now, let's just have a brief look inside. The sun was low on the horizon when we started walking out of Stephansplatz. Our next destination is the Rathaus, or the town hall of Vienna. This is where the largest Christmas market in Vienna is located. The place is very jovially decorated with lights and Christmas trees. Once here, the festive mood just comes on. Therefore, it's of no surprise that it is incredibly crowded and very touristy. Locals do not come here. We even saw a queue of people for posing in front of some lights. That is something you do only when you are a tourist and not a local. We explored another nearby Christmas tree lighting and looked at this huge collection of candies. Amongst the light and the stalls, our exploration continued. With the main Christmas market visited, we decided to call it a day and enjoyed some Sackertot in a nearby cafe. Sackertot is a kind of chocolate cake and is famous for being a favorite for the Habsburg Empress Sisi. After that, we headed home, had dinner and slept early for the early train tomorrow. The next day, our train from Central Station Vienna, or Wien Hauptbahnhof, was at 9:10 in the morning. We packed up and arrived by metro about 20 to 25 minutes before and waited for the train to arrive. The train was on time and we reached Praha Hlavní nádraží at 1 p.m. By the way, Hlavní nádraží stands for Central Station in Czech. Upon arrival, the first priority is cash, as Czech Republic uses Czech koruna as their currency. We found an ATM outlet nearby and got some cash. Then we walked to the metro station that is next to Hlavní nádraží to catch a metro to go to the hotel. Then we needed to buy a ticket for the metro, and this proved to be far more difficult than we anticipated, because the only way to buy tickets from the machines were using coins, which we had none at this point. After trying a few different tactics, we decided to walk back to the main station and buy tickets from a manual counter there, which we did, and finally reached hotel at around 3 p.m. After a quick refreshment later, headed out into the streets. Because we have half a day and the sun was almost down, we decided to stick to the old town in Prague. Our hotel was very close to the old town square, which is the main point of attraction. Soon we found ourselves in the middle of the old town square in Prague. Old Town Square is the oldest and the most historic part of Prague, dating back more than 1,000 years. All around here are ancient buildings and churches. Today is Christmas Eve and the square is in full celebration mood. On one corner of the square is the world famous astronomical clock, which tells you every detail about time if you can read it. People gather in masses to watch this age-old clock tick away. The astronomical clock is housed in the old town hall, which is undergoing renovation when we went to Prague. Even then, we were able to see the astronomical clock, and more than watching the astronomical clock, enjoyed watching the people watching the astronomical clock. Today in Christmas Eve and the square is phenomenally crowded. People watching is a great experience here. Moving past the Christmas market stalls, we find the statue of Jan Hus in the center of the square. Jan Hus was a religious reformer and protested against the monopoly of Catholic Church in the 1400s. He was a seminal figure in the Bohemian Reformation. Finally, directly across the clock tower or the old town hall, dominating the square is the Tin Church. The Tin Church has been the main church of the city since the 14th century, and so we see the beautifully decorated Christmas tree right in front of it. This church has been a part of the Hussite Reformation in the 1400s, and then it was re-Catholicized in the 1600s. The golden image of Mary seen in the front gable of the church was molded by melting a golden chalice that used to sit in the cavity below as a Hussite symbol. Just beside the Tin Church is the National Gallery of Prague, which currently is a fine arts museum. Right now, the entire square is a Christmas market and it is extremely crowded. Come on, let's have a look around. After spending some time looking around, we started walking towards the Charles Bridge. If you think of ancient and historical bridges, Charles Bridge would be one of the first. Made out of Czech sandstone on top of Vltava River, this was built in the mid-1300s under the rule of Charles IV, hence the Charles Bridge. The bridge served as a solid land connection between the old town square and the Prague castle and played a key role in making Prague an important trading hub. On the old town side of the bridge, there is a statue of King Charles IV and the Charles Tower. This bridge is an extremely popular tourist spot and is often very crowded as well. Taking in the view from the bridge, you can enjoy the amazing performance of these street musicians. all along the bridge. There are total 30 statues on either side. By the time we got there, it was fairly dark and GoPro was not able to capture video very well in the darkness. So I started playing with the moon behind the clouds and the statues to get some nice composition. One statue of particular fame is the statue of John of Nepomuk, who was thrown from the bridge for not telling the king about his queen's secret confession. Legend has it that when Saint John of the Nepomuk was thrown from the Charles Bridge, where he landed, 5 stars appeared, and that is what is captured in the statue here. It has become a tradition to touch the statue of the saint for good fortune. Wandering through the bridge and taking in the view of the ancient city of Prague from this historic bridge, we reach where the bridge ends. This is where we decided to have a baguette for snacks. Then, after some discussion, decided that now would be a good time to get our tripod and head to the Shooter's Island for some nice pictures. Shooter's Island is an island in the Vltava river which has a nice viewpoint for the city. No regular tourists come here, so it is quiet and empty. So it is full on photography time. We started by shooting the National Theatre and its reflection on the river, and for more than an hour we took many photos here. It was a very nice find that I found after talking to a professional photographer who lives in Prague, who pointed me to a photography website where this location was listed. Next, we went to another spot that was mentioned in the website to photograph the St. Vitus Cathedral along with the Charles Bridge. It was already 9 PM by this point and wind was starting to pick up. So we took a few shots, but due to the wind, the reflection was not very clear. Also, there are lots of seagulls sleeping on the river. That was quite interesting. It was close to 10 and we started looking for a place to eat. Finally, we ended up here in the restaurant of a 5-star hotel. The meal was good, but it sure put a ding in our pocket. After that, we went back to the hotel ready for the next day. Our second day in Prague started with a visit to the restaurant for breakfast. We had breakfast packaged together with the hotel plan, so we had our fair share. Then we headed to the Prague Castle. Pushing ahead with the crowd and the queue, we went in. Prague Castle is an ancient symbol of the Czech state and the most significant historical monument. It is the largest coherent castle complex in the world and has many historical buildings, the most prominent one being the St. Vitus Cathedral. Today is 25th of December and due to this, St. Vitus was closed till 1:30 PM. We reached around 11:30, so we explored the palace grounds and admired the cathedral from outside. Then we went to see the old palace building where we saw Vladislav Hall that was built in the 1500s. The adjacent room prohibited photography and displayed some items used by the kings. On another room, we saw a replica of the Czech crown and the portrait of the kings. We then went to the Basilica of St. George. This may be of interest to historians, but we rested our legs by sitting on the benches for a while. There are some very old relics here, but personally I wasn't too interested. By this time, the cathedral was open and we made our way there only to find a very long queue. Fortunately, the queue moved very quickly and we were soon in the cathedral. St. Vitus Cathedral is mostly Gothic. From the pointed arches and spires to the painted windows, it has all the Gothic hallmarks. Construction began in 1344 but was only partly finished. In the latter half of the 15th century, attempt was made to finish the cathedral, which introduced some Baroque elements, most obviously the Baroque spire of the south tower. From this southern side, the Golden Gate can also be seen. We entered the castle through this doorway, which is the western facade. The massive nave is right in front and on both sides there are many chapels. All the chapels have stained glass windows, which is typical Gothic style depicting various incidents from the Bible. One main highlight of the cathedral is the St. Wenceslas Chapel, which contains the tomb of the most important provincial patron saint, St. Wenceslas. The chapel is not open to the public, but we saw it from the doorways. We moved out of the cathedral with a sense of awe. This was our last stop at the palace grounds, but one more thing before we go. There are royal guards posted at the outside of the palace grounds. At every hour mark, the men are shuffled with an 100-year-old traditional display.
Hoe lang moet je staan?
In Engeland 2.
We exit the castle through the Gate of the Giants, named after the battling Titan statues that adorn the gate. The gate opens to Radkani Square, which offers some of the best views of the city. From the Radkani Square, we follow the old castle stairs, which is 121 stairs altogether. After walking a little bit, this leads to our next stop, the Lennon Wall. This wall is named after John Lennon, the famous founder of Beatles. When we reached the wall, however, we found it to be a big mess. It is just a mishmash of a million graffitis, and the original Lennon graphic that the wall is famous for is no longer visible. This wall has become a tourist magnet and it attracts far more tourists than it really should. I did not even point my camera at the wall here. This wall really needs a whitewash. We were hungry by this point, so we went for some food. and then back to the hotel. It was about 5:30 p.m. so we had time for one more place. After some thought, we set out to see the Powder Tower and the Municipal House, which completes most attractions in Prague for us. The Prasnbrana, or the Powder Tower, is one of the 14 original city gates. Currently, it separates the old town and the new town in Prague. The gate opens the road called Naprikiope, which leads through the old town square and then across the Charles Bridge to the St. Vitus Cathedral, all major landmarks we have seen before. In 17th century, the tower was used to store gunpowder and it has been named Powder Tower ever since. Next to the Powder Tower is the Municipal House. The current building is in Art Nouveau style and the house contains a concert hall and a ballroom. From here we went back the way we came to the old town square, and here we made the time lapse of the old town square that we saw earlier. Now that we have seen most landmarks of Prague, let's hear a little piece of music from another street musician, and the instrument she uses is unique. This concludes our time in Prague, and tomorrow we will be headed for Cologne. Because Cologne is quite far away from Prague, flying as opposed to going by train is more suitable. We boarded the Eurowings flight 773 from Prague at about 1 p.m, which gets us at Cologne at about 2 p.m. Cologne for us is actually a waypoint to Amsterdam. We will spend the night in Cologne and head off to Amsterdam early in the morning. That way we can explore Amsterdam for 2 days, and we have to stay for only one night in Amsterdam because staying in Amsterdam is very expensive. Before long we got to Cologne airport. Getting our baggages, checking out and taking a train to Cologne Central Station or Hauptbahnhof takes more or less an hour and a half, and so we reached there at about 3:30 p.m. As soon as you step outside the central station, you will see the Cologne Cathedral, which is the main point of attraction in Cologne. There are numerous other small churches in Cologne, more than 100 in fact, but nothing compared to this. We headed to our hotel, which was just 5 minutes away. This hotel happens to be a 4-star hotel, and that was immediately evident when we entered the room. The hotel window had a killer view of the cathedral, and during night time it looked majestic. It's difficult to express in words how grand it feels to be able to see the Cologne Cathedral as you are about to go to sleep. This photo was taken just before I went to bed. Now, as I was saying before, we did not plan on actually exploring Cologne. Rather, it was a waypoint to Amsterdam. The day was meant to be a rest day, but we were joined by Martin, who is from nearby Aachen. Somnath knows him from IISc. With him, we went wandering around in Cologne, walking by the Rhine river. Then we went to the Cologne Cathedral to take a look inside. Having studied architecture, Martin filled us in with all kinds of interesting facts and tidbits, such as how the cathedral is built entirely out of limestone, without the use of any concrete. A large portion of the cathedral does not have any steel scaffolding either. Now, due to pollution and acid rain, the stones are being corroded, as limestone is quite sensitive to acid. Constant renovation is trying to keep up with the degradation. Being almost 900 years old, there is a great deal of fascinating stories and history about the architecture and art of Kölner Dom or Cologne Cathedral. The construction of the dome started in the 1100s but was disrupted in the 1400s. The eastern facade and the highest southern spires were built in the late 1800s, finishing the world's fourth tallest cathedral. After admiring this marvel, we went to a nearby brauhaus or brewery to have our dinner. Together with Martin, we spent a wonderful evening, and our rest day in Cologne took on a new meaning. Admiring the night view from the window, we went to bed early because tomorrow we are headed to Amsterdam at 6 am. Of all the European cities we visited this trip, and also before, Amsterdam was a different experience. Indeed, this fact is actually well known that Amsterdam has a different feel for most tourists. You might think that it is because of the pragmatic approach of the Dutch with legalized prostitution and open cannabis markets, but in my experience it is more subtle than that. Yes, Amsterdam is famous for its red light districts, with prostitutes displaying themselves in the windows. True that the city air smells of marijuana, but it is not just those that feel so different about Amsterdam. It is an experience as a whole. We reached Amsterdam on the rainy morning of the 27th of December at around 9:30 am. Here we stayed at Maria's place, which is a bed and breakfast service as opposed to a hotel. The place itself is outside the city on the other side of the Amstel River, but still it cost us more than we paid for the 4-star hotel in Cologne, so you can imagine just how much expensive Amsterdam is. After freshening up, we headed out. First stop was to have some lunch, and Google did not help us in this case because all the suggestions of Google was extremely crowded. So we just picked a roadside restaurant and had our lunch there. One thing we have learned by traveling many places in Europe is that when in doubt, pick an Italian restaurant. You are far less likely to go wrong that way. So that's what we did here. After lunch, we headed to Dam Square, which is the main square in Amsterdam. Here you can see the city monument, the royal palace, and lots of interesting people. From Dam Square, we headed along Kalverstraat, which is the central shopping street in Amsterdam. Now this is the thing with Amsterdam. It has that sort of business center vibe with crowded streets and the ever-present smell of hemp. Following Kalverstraat, we come to Bloemen Market, peeping into the entrance of Amsterdam Museum briefly. Unfortunately, this is winter, otherwise Bloemen Market would be a very nice display of flowers. Netherlands exports the largest amount of flowers in the world, as tulips grows really well in the salty soil. Now there are mostly souvenirs and artificial flower bouquets, some with cleverly designed hovering hummingbirds. We decided that this is the place to get some small souvenir, which we did the next day. Bloemenmarkt was the last major stoppage for today. Now let me make a few points about Amsterdam before we jump into tomorrow. Unlike many other European cities, in winter Amsterdam is not very scenic at all. It does not have famous historical monuments like other European cities. It is not a place to shoot memoirs or portraits, but a place to have a different and unique experience, an experience that the camera falls short of capturing. In our 2 days of stay in Amsterdam, neither I or Somnath took out our cameras. We did not shoot any picture at all, only some videos for documentation purposes. Amsterdam is well known for its misty and rainy weather, not suitable for taking nice pictures. Amsterdam is very touristy, and we saw many tourists just going about their business taking pictures, but we are photographers, and photographers understand when to take pictures. We do not take pictures for sake of taking pictures. We take pictures to convey meaning. And during our stay in Amsterdam, we could not find such opportunities at all. Big attractions here are museums where cameras are not allowed, and the red light districts where you should not take pictures anyway. So this came to me even as a surprise, but I do not have any photos in Amsterdam barring one, which I will show later. For truly enjoying Amsterdam, you have to be here in summer, and I am planning to do that. In my opinion, Amsterdam is best enjoyed with no luggage and no camera and a very open mind. The next day, the weather was sunny and beautiful. We got a bit lucky in this regard, I must say. The night before, we did extensive planning and booked all tickets for visiting a few museums. Since cameras are not allowed in the museums anyway, I did not bring my SLR with me this time. We went to the Dutch Resistance Museum first, where there is nice documentation of the Dutch resistance movement against the Nazis and the sheer atrocities of the war. More time would have been better, but we had a scheduled ticket for the Anne Frank house at 11:45 am. So we reached there on time and stood in the long queue to get in. Anne Frank was a German Jewish girl who moved to Amsterdam in 1933 when she was 4 years old. Her father was a businessman. In 1940, Germany invaded Netherlands and seized power. In 1942, the Jew hunting was so bad that Anne's father decided to go to hiding in the back rooms of his office building. It was here where young Anne wrote a diary from her daily experiences in the hiding house. She wanted to publish a novel, but the Frank family was captured and sent to Auschwitz, where she died at the age of 16. Her father completed her wish by publishing the diary, which has stunned the entire world. In the Anne Frank house, you can relive those haunted days, and you are bound to respect the young diarist that shocked the world. After the phenomenal experience of the Anne Frank house, we planned to go to the Van Gogh Museum. In English, the famous artist is known as Van Gogh, but in Dutch, it's Vincent van Gogh. That's the closest I can come to pronouncing it. Unfortunately, no online tickets were available, and we did not have time to stand in the queue for an hour. So that was cut, and we went to the Diamond Museum instead. Amsterdam was famous for its diamond cutting and polishing industry. The Diamond Museum displays replicas of many famous diamonds and information on diamond cutting and designing. It also has some tools in display that are used for the job. It is a small museum, but it has some impressive looking displays, including this diamond lined chimpanzee skull. From the Diamond Museum, we went towards the Rijksmuseum. In front of the Rijksmuseum is the famous I Am Amsterdam sign, which has become an icon for tourists. We enjoyed looking at people trying to ice skate. Taking a chair as your partner makes it a lot easier to do. By this point, our day was pretty much done, so we headed to the Bloemen market to buy a souvenir, and then we were off to Janse Schans, a small town outside Amsterdam. The next day, we were in a relaxed mood. In Janse Schans, we were staying in a hotel that is located on the bank of a lake. The morning was beautiful with the sun coming up over the lake, but soon, as the forecast predicted, it got completely cloudy, and according to forecast, rain would start around 2 p.m. So before that is our window to see the area. We went on foot to explore the area. After walking for a while, we arrived here. It is said that the land in Holland is so flat that if you were to stand on a chair, you can see all of Holland. Indeed, looking around here, you can see why that saying goes. The land here is very flat indeed. Around here, there are some windmills. And one of them offered a tour. We went in to take a look inside, and the owner explained how the windmill works. Here, they are extracting oil from canola seeds. The windmill rotates the massive stone wheels which crushes the seeds into a sort of dry paste.
Here, I let it turn for a couple of runs. I opening this one, putting this under it. All the broken linseeds coming in here. If you stay over here, you can see what I'm doing next. See, there's a small wheel, it's not running now. The big wheel is running because it's always connected to the big axe. But now I leave down the small one. You see what happens? So this is running. When I lift it up, it stops running. See, now it's connected again and it's running again.
The paste is then pressed into another device which is also powered by the windmill to extract the oil.
I want one, put one in here and one in there. And then I can make a connection with the big axe over here. I can make a connection with the stamper, the hay over here. And I can stamp this in. You can imagine with this one, I can press it in. And I really need air protection there because
the oil is stored in drums and then they sell it to a nearby paint factory. While in the windmill, it started raining heavily, so we decided to head back and take a rest. Throughout that day, we listened to the whistling of wind through our windows, not metaphorically. Literally, we could hear the whistling sound as the wind passed by. This completes our 1-week trip across 4 countries, visiting 4 major cities. The next day, we packed up and headed home. Tours are an expansive experience. It allows you to move out of your comfort zone and experience not only the outside world but you yourself. Until next time, I am Deepan and keep traveling.